Welcome to the fourth memorial lecture in honor of Professor Edward de Bono. Okay, as I said, it's our fourth, and we've had the pleasure of having a number of distinguished scholars who we are privileged to also call colleagues. And these scholars this year we have the pleasure of having Professor Puccio with us, grace us with their presentations celebrating creativity, which is something which is or used to be very close to Professor de Bono's heart. So to run through the program for this annual lecture today, I would like to first welcome you all. I am Margaret Manjon. I am the director at the Edward de Bono Institute at the University of Malta. The institute was set up in 1992 by Professor de Bono himself, our colleague Professor Sandra Dingley, and the then rector Professor Peter Saracino-Glott. And since then, we have made considerable progress, I might say, and to this I would like to publicly thank all my colleagues. So the program for today will essentially run in the following manner. So I will introduce Professor Puccio, who will then take over with his presentation. After that, we will have a Q&A, and I would like to invite you to write your questions in the chat. Okay, so we will take note of your questions and we'll ask Professor Puccio the questions on your behalf. After that, once we finish the Q&A, we'll have Caspar de Bono, who is Professor de Bono's son, who will say a few words. Okay, and then we will conclude the webinar. Now that we are here, I cannot not take the opportunity to celebrate the institute that he was so passionate about. Okay, at the institute these days, we do not refer to creativity alone as the main pillar, but we have four other pillars as well, essentially innovation management, entrepreneurship, critical thinking, and future studies. And we also offer an undergraduate diploma, a master, our flagship master program in creativity and innovation, and we also offer studies at doctoral level. Okay, so with this, I would like to introduce our speaker. So, Professor Puccio, thank you for, we are very grateful for your kind support in this memorial lecture today. So, Professor Puccio chairs the Center for Applied Imagination and is a leading scholar practitioner in creativity. Professor Puccio is housed at Buffalo State University in New York, and he has authored 60 or over 60 works, including Organizational Creativity and Innovation, which he published in 2018, and also the team-building fable, The Innovative Team. Professor Puccio is a sought-after speaker and a consultant who delivered creativity programs on 5 continents for a diverse client base, including BBC, Nestle, Coca-Cola, and the Smithsonian. His teaching credentials include designing the Great Courses series, the Creative Thinkers Toolkit, while he also has quite a popular and demanded 2012 TEDx talk, which has surpassed 100,000 views. And with this, Professor Puccio, I would like to invite you to deliver your lecture for us today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Meg. I appreciate it. And thank you to Leonie and Caspar as well. It's an absolute honor to be here. I am going to share my screen. So I had the good fortune of being in the presence of Dr. Edward de Bono on 2 occasions. So let me begin with those 2 personal stories. The first was in the early 1980s. I was an undergraduate student. Dr. de Bono came to the Creative Problem Solving Institute as a keynote speaker. I was unaware of his already long and established storied career and his thought leadership in the field of creativity. So I went into this keynote presentation completely open-minded and unaware, and was absolutely, anyone who has ever attended in person a keynote knows how riveting Dr. de Bono is as a speaker. So that was the first time I had an opportunity to be in Dr. de Bono's presence. The second time was many years later, approximately about 3 decades later, and not from a distance. This was an up close and personal exchange. I had the good fortune of being a co-keynote speaker at a creativity and innovation conference in Dublin, Ireland. We happened to be staying in the same hotel, and we shared a taxi ride together over to the venue. And let me just say how nervous I was as a big fan of Dr. de Bono, and he put me completely at ease. If you've seen him deliver a speech, you know how witty and humorous he is. And I can tell you, after sharing a 10 to 15-minute taxi ride with him, that's not only for show. I was treated to 15 minutes of an absolute joke fest in the taxi. I was rapid fire receiving jokes, which had me in stitches and completely put me at ease. He was so generous. And so it is because of those experiences and knowing the role as a pioneer in deliberate creativity, it is an absolute honor to be here and to deliver this lecture in honor of Dr. de Bono. So the title of my presentation is Creative Thinking and Artificial Intelligence. Is creative education still relevant? This is not a canned lecture. These are current thoughts and a question that I have been wrestling with. So in a way, I will be revealing to you some of the machinations that I'm currently going through and some of the tentative conclusions that I've come to. And because this is not a canned presentation, you may literally hear me thinking as I'm going through this presentation. So I have about 30 minutes to deliver this talk, and then, as Meg pointed out, we'll open it up for some questions and hopefully some thoughtful answers to the questions that you pose. Meg was kind enough to mention I represent the Center for Applied Imagination. This figure that you see here, this cartoon characterization, is of Alex Osborne. So much like the De Bono Institute that has a significant figure in the field of creativity that helped to establish this institute, in a similar way, we come from a visionary as well in the field of applied creativity, Alex Osborne, who was the creator of creative problem solving and brainstorming, a well-known, much like Six Thinking Hats and lateral thinking and the many other tools that Dr. de Bono created. Osborne is well known for creating and committing himself to applied creativity and to creative education. So a bit about our center. The Center for Applied Imagination was founded in 1967. As far as we know, is the first Master of Science degree in creativity and change leadership in the world, which was launched in the mid-1970s. We offer a graduate certificate in creativity and change leadership, which is a 6-course, 18-credit-hour advanced graduate certificate that is bestowed by the State University of New York. We offer several micro-credentials, one in applied creative thinking and problem solving. Because of the international reputation of the department, we offer our programs both as distance and on campus. We have over 800 alumni at this point, and the State University of New York 2 weeks ago approved our doctoral program proposal, which has now gone to the State Education Department in New York. once the state education department approves that proposal, our hope is to launch a doctoral program in creativity and change leadership in the fall of 2026. So that's a little bit of background. You can see we share a similar orientation as to the De Bono Institute, where we integrate theory and application. So we very much view the field of creativity and the study of creativity as a gateway to effective application and problem solving through and powered by creative thinking. Again, we share that in common with the De Bono Institute. So let's start off with this question. Is creative thinking important today? Having been in the field of creativity for 35 years as a faculty member at the Center for Applied Imagination, I can say I have well-earned gray hairs, and there's never been, I can tell you, a better time to study creativity because of the acknowledgement by many government agencies, business leaders, educational leaders, including here, I will cite just one source, the World Economic Forum. In January, they came out with their most recent report identifying the top skills for success in the workplace. The slide that I'm sharing now highlights over the next 5 years the employers that were surveyed, their outlook for whether there would be an increase, neutral, or decrease in certain skills in terms of their importance. And you can see between 2025 and projecting out to 2030, creative thinking, and I can give you the number on this, 63% of those surveyed said that there would be increased demand for creative thinking going forward. So it continues to be a skill that is receiving great attention. I believe because of the work of Dr. De Bono and Dr. Osborne, being pioneers in the field of creativity, it has helped to reinforce and to set the stage for the relevance of creative thinking today. Of course, as it is often touted, we live in an increasingly uncertain, ambiguous, fast-changing world, and that's the major reason why creative thinking has come to the fore as being recognized as a crucial workplace skill. And it doesn't look like the importance will diminish over the next 5 years. Now, what I think is interesting about the World Economic Forum list of skills is I would argue that creative thinking, while it appears as the fourth most important skill going forward, it really does tie into many other skill sets that appear in this list. So as we look at this list, I'll bring up my annotation tool. There are others on here like resilience, flexibility, and agility that can happen without a creative mindset. Just below that, curiosity and lifelong learning is fueled by creativity. And of course, curiosity is one of those personality traits that is most highly associated with the creative individual. Leadership and social influence. I know at the De Bono Institute, and certainly in our curriculum, we draw a very close relationship between creativity and leadership. And in fact, many argue that today creativity must be a core leadership skill. Fundamentally, what allows leaders to be successful? Leaders, at the end of the day, solve problems. And leaders are tasked with solving not simple problems, but complex problems, problems that are often novel and do not have easy answers, problems that involve a great deal of ambiguity. So creative thinking is widely recognized by, and especially if you follow, for example, the research of Michael Mumford out of the University of Oklahoma, a very skill-based approach to framing leadership. Creative thinking and creative problem solving are often associated with leadership. So I would argue that creative thinking, while we can celebrate the fact that it is the fourth most important and will continue to be an important, crucial skill, Because creative thinking is a higher order and universal skill, I would argue that it supports many other skill sets found in this list. So, is creativity an important skill today? Without a doubt. But there is one skill here that gives me pause, and I don't know if it gives others pause as well, but that is AI, artificial intelligence, and the rapid development, dissemination, and adoption of artificial intelligence. At one time, we could argue, and I think with merit, that machines would most likely take over work that was algorithmic, and that creative work could not be replicated by machines. I don't believe we can hold that argument today because of the rapid development, dissemination, and adoption of artificial intelligence. So I am going to focus in on and kind of let you into the existential question that keeps me up at night, frankly, job security. How secure is my job as a creativity professor? And I will give you some insight into the initial conclusions that I've come to. Before I do that, let me share with you a couple of projects that I am working on that relate to this question about the relevance of creative education in the year 2025. First of all, I'm working on a book. I am on sabbatical for the academic year 2024-2025. One of the books I'm working on is called The Mid-Century Creativity Reader with Vlad Glavinow, Joe Udis, and Matej Schwartz. In this book, we are going back to the 1950s and 60s and early 70s, the time period when Dr. de Bono began his own work. And we are publishing heretofore unpublished speeches delivered by, and if you know the field of creativity, many of these names will be familiar to you, real figures in our field. By the way, at the bottom of this slide is a URL that will take you to the speeches. And so if you're interested in hearing, for example, J.P. Guilford's voice, Donald McKinnon, Paul Torrance, other intellectuals such as Joseph Campbell and C. Wright Mills, I invite you to get a screen grab of this and to visit that site. So in this Mid-Century Creativity Reader, in the introduction, we look at the stages of development for our field, the field of creativity, where we break this into, if you will, 3 stages: a preconception period between 1850 and 1950, which Vlad Glavinow's first creativity reader book covered. So this was very early thinking about this human phenomenon called creativity. They're really these were individuals often disconnected from one another who were writing about their personal insights and opinions about creativity, kind of laid the foundation for more serious inquiry, which is what the 1950 to 1975, roughly speaking, stage of development, which we call the gestation period, which was the early formation of a field. And here's where Edward de Bono played such a crucial role, especially bringing this to a level of awareness in society that few others were able to do. So this period was marked by very serious, thoughtful considerations to the nature and nurture of creativity. That then led to what we refer to as the maturation period from 1975 to present. And the reason why we call this the maturation period, because at this point, it became much more formal, and evidence of this you can see in yellow highlight, perhaps here, testing your eyes, were the formation of degree programs and institutes and curricula that represent the fact that there was enough knowledge in the field, enough content to build a curriculum around. And so I would argue that Dr. de Bono spanned and helped to build the bridge between these two stages of development for our field. So that's one current project I'm working on. The second is, and the De Bono Institute is represented in this publication, which will be out in August 2025. And that is a survey of educational programs dedicated to applied creativity around the world. The name of the book is The Palgrave Handbook of Applied Creativity in Global Higher Education. Part of our mission at the Center for Applied Imagination is to help grow the field. At one time, when I was younger and less mature and naive, I used to take pride in the fact that we were one of very few, and for some time, the sole program dedicated to students and educating them in creativity in higher education. But our mission at our center is to help grow the field and to expand the number of programs dedicated to teaching applied creativity. So as part of that mission, we did this survey. We found more than 70 applied creativity programs now exist around the world. The book sorts these into 4 clusters. Some programs span more than one cluster. And so the book is organized around 4 topical areas or 4 types of programs: undergraduate programs in creativity, graduate programs in creativity, courses and concentrations within specific programs, and multi-pronged institutional-wide initiatives such as innovation labs and innovation spaces and so forth. And I'm very pleased to have the De Bono Institute participate in this book. So it is this book that I was working on when this existential question occurred to me. In January of this year, January 2025, as part of my sabbatical, had the opportunity to spend 6 weeks in London, and there I had the chance to visit the Bayes Business School and their creativity center, and deliver several seminars. And as I was planning these seminars and as I was writing the concluding chapter to this book, The Palgrave Handbook of Applied Creativity in Global Higher Education, I was wrestling with the impact of artificial intelligence on creative education. AI can very quickly out-generate an human being when it comes to divergent thinking. And so as I was wrapping up this book, it occurred to me, can we as creativity educators, can we compete with artificial intelligence? Does this threaten the work that we do? I had the good fortune of visiting, as I mentioned, the Bayes Business School, and there is a Center for Creativity Applied, Center for Creativity and Artificial Intelligence. And I had some crucial conversations which helped me to gain some insight and to come with 2 conclusions relative to this question that give me some solace in terms of the importance of, and in fact, have reinforced for me the importance of creativity education in a world where artificial intelligence is becoming so ubiquitous. And these are the 2 tentative answers that I have to this question. First of all, in speaking with a doctoral student, unpublished work, so I can't cite the work, but he had retold his current research on artificial intelligence and creativity. He had shared a multi phase research study examining humans working through a real world problem versus humans working with AI and AI working alone. And his conclusion was AI can outperform when it comes to designing creative solutions, can outperform humans in general, with the exception that those designers who are trained in deliberate creativity, who are really familiar with the creative process and applied creativity and deliberate creativity methods, are more skillful at interacting with AI in a way that produces, as judged by experts, produces more creative solutions. Aha. So I walk into the Bayes Business School with this existential question, asking myself about my own relevance as a creative educator. And here, this doctoral student gives me, in part, partial answer to this question, which makes complete sense. As we're using tools, if we're not skillful in that area, we can't make the most of those tools. I am terrible at carpentry. You can give me the best carpentry tools in the world, but I am not a master craftsman and highly unlikely for me to build magnificent furniture, for example. So as we interact with AI, if our goal is to get creative outcomes out of AI, we need to be masters of deliberate creativity in order to master that tool. Second response, second answer I have to this question, how important is it to teach applied creativity today when we have tools like AI? The second insight that I had during this visit to Bayes and while in London in January is that to sustain our humanness, we have to continue to be creative. We need to be creative. Let me dig into this a little more deeply, starting with the standard definition of creativity. So many of us familiar with the study of creativity recognize this definition. Creativity is the production of original ideas that are considered valuable. It's stated in various ways, but these two components come together that creative outcomes, in order to be considered creative, need to be original. There needs to be an element of novelty, and there must be some value. And that's fine, but I think there's a limitation to this definition because this definition focuses on a product and it misses the transformational effect that creativity has on the human, on us as individuals. It has, if you will, an external locus rather than an internal locus as we think about creativity being a fundamental aspect of humanity and the human species, and the fact that we have evolved to be creative, which, digging a little more deeply into this, my training is as an organizational psychologist, and for many years, my main attraction to organizational creativity was to make a case for creativity being a driver for innovation, or if you will, organizational oriented outcomes. What are the benefits of creativity to the organization? Which, frankly, looking back on it, as I just referenced, is more of an external locus focus on creativity. So creativity drives innovation, profitability, competitiveness, learning within the organization, and organizational survival. But more recently, and this was the results of a literature review for a book on organizational creativity that Matej Schwartz and I did, more current research is focusing on what we refer to as human-centered outcomes of creativity. That is, how does creativity within the organization transform the individual? What is the benefit for the individual? And there's some fascinating research that is underscoring that when we allow people to engage in being creative, it enhances their satisfaction at work. It gives them a greater sense of meaning. It allows them to respond better to crisis. There was a lovely study looking at how individuals and organizations managed the global COVID pandemic, and those who had greater capacity to be creative problem solvers were able to cope better with that crisis. It encourages more engagement at work. It reduces the intention to leave, and it brings down absenteeism. And so while we can turn to AI as a tool for creativity, if we do that strictly in the absence of humans engaging in creativity, yes, we may achieve organizational oriented outcome or these external outcomes, but we miss the transformation that individuals go through. And I believe fundamentally that engaging in creativity enhances our well-being. And so, last point here in terms of the importance of creativity for us as humans, quick little diversion into polarity thinking. So, I'm going to use this to set up what I hope is the punchline to why it is important and relevant for institutes like the De Bono Institute at the University of Malta and our work and the 70 some other programs that exist around the world. And by the way, 70 programs in higher education focused on creative education is such a small percentage of the number of universities in the world. That's a crying shame. It should be every university should be, I believe, offering courses and curricula in deliberate creativity. So as I said, the punchline, using polarity thinking to set up my final comment about the importance of creativity education today in 2025 and in the short term going forward. So, quick little lesson around polarity thinking. This comes from the work of Barry Johnson, but of course, he wasn't the first to talk about the integration of opposites or being able to hold two opposing thoughts that seem to be contradictory, but in reality create an interdependent whole. You can go back to Carl Jung's work, for example, on this, but Barry Johnson very eloquently describes what polarities are, which have three characteristics. Polarities are two poles that apparently seem to be in contradiction, but create an interdependent whole. In other words, both need to coexist in order for the system to be healthy. And third criterion for polarity is that they're value neutral. One pole cannot be innately more beneficial or more important than another pole. Quick example, rest versus activity. So you think about the human condition, we need both rest and activity. This is an interdependent relationship. If we get overly focused on one or the other, we suffer, and therefore there is a polarity in that we must move fluidly between these two states of rest and activity. So, final point to underscore the importance of creativity in education today, and that is the polarity that I call the doing creativity and the being creativity. So, doing creativity is the act of being creative. And here we can think about tools like six thinking hats or creative problem solving or brainstorming. Tools allow us to engage more efficiently in the doing of creativity. It is going to be very difficult for humans to compete with AI because AI does a very good job in the doing of creativity. Anyone who's played with AI as I have, you know how quickly your prompts are responded to, lightning fast, and it's going to be quite difficult for us as humans to compete with that. On the being side is where we live. Think about this as everyday creativity. We encapsulate in our own being and our behavior a creative mindset. And so to underscore this, let me share a personal story with you. So I have two boys, they're adults now, but when they were children, one of my absolute favorite activities with them was bedtime. I loved putting them to bed because we would tell stories, or I would tell stories. And one of the activities that we did to uh, prompt these stories is I would ask the boys to give me 3 words or 3 experiences, the first 3 thoughts that popped up into their heads. And I would take those 3 examples and I would weave together in real time, in the moment, a story. And I would create a bedtime story out of that. And I loved the challenge for myself. And I derived great personal satisfaction from that experience. And I think they did as well. If you've played with AI, you know how quickly AI can generate a story in a similar way. Feed into the prompt 3 random words, and literally seconds later, you have a bedtime story that you can tell your children. We could do that, and that's incredibly efficient. The doing can happen in seconds, but we miss the being and the personal experience we derive and satisfaction from creating ourselves. And so the final answer in my mind, in terms of the importance of creative education, is in order to maintain our humanness and to help our students and others maintain their humanness, we need to pay attention to focusing both on the doing, deliberately understanding how to facilitate creativity when we're engaged with and working with AI, but also have that ability to engage in our own human beingness of creativity. So, in conclusion, how important is it to teach applied creativity today? This existential question that I was very much wrestling with and losing sleep. I have 2 answers to that. One, in summary, those who master deliberate creativity are in a much stronger position to master artificial intelligence as a tool. We need to be intelligent about the creative process in order to effectively interact with artificial intelligence. Second, to sustain our humanness, we must continue to be creative. And with that, Meg, I'm going to turn it back to you. Here's contact information as we're posing and responding to questions in case anyone wishes to reach out to me. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Puccio, for an excellent presentation. I'm sure that I surely enjoyed it, and I'm sure that my colleagues and everyone in the room enjoyed it too. And by everyone in the room, I must say that we have a presence of 97 individuals in the
That's
room.
fantastic. Yeah,
So,
I'm so honored.
so there you go. So thank you very much. We do have a comment in the chat, and in the meantime, I would like to invite everyone or anyone who might have a question to pop it in the Q&A box so that we can read it and ask the question to Professor Puccio. So here we have a question from Christopher Spitzer. So thank you for the talk, Dr. Puccio. And the question is, if Dr. Alex Osborne and Dr. Edward de Bono were alive today, how do you imagine they would engage with these AI tools? Interesting one.
That is an interesting one. And uh, Christopher Spitzer is a student in our graduate program. And it's interesting that his question is the first one, Meg, that you brought to the fore. I know Chris he got introduced to the field of creativity through Edward de Bono. So it's interesting to have the first question come from Chris, and a thought-provoking question. I would imagine that both being practitioners of applied creativity and being open-minded and playful. I can only imagine that they would very much see the power of the tool of artificial intelligence and not, you think back to the early industrial revolution and how machinery was portrayed as a threat and the enemy and an adversary, and there were riots. Rather than a reaction, strong negative reaction, I would imagine that they would be both Edward de Bono and Alex Osborne. Osborne, of course, I'm much closer to, did not know him personally, but through stories of Sid Barnes and others that knew him directly, was very open-minded and embraced such tools. But I think they would have reinforced, I hope, what I had mentioned in terms of the importance of creativity being transformational and embracing our own being. I know they were both strong advocates for creative education. Certainly, I know Dr. De Bono at all levels was a proponent of creative education. And J.P. Guilford said, hey, look, to live is to have problems, and to solve problems creatively leads to creative growth. So until I think that moment when there's the singularity and we're walking around with AI embedded in our own brains, I think it's incumbent upon us. And I think the more I'm responding now to your question or Chris's question, the more it occurs to me that they probably would have been strong advocates and even stronger advocates for, in the face of artificial intelligence, we can't give up our creativity. We have to make sure that students at all levels practice this important thinking skill. So that's what I would imagine.
Possibly. So possibly that's what they would have taught. And to link on to that question, we have something else from Eric Optenberg, who asked how to use AI for suggestions to improve your own being creative. So Eric's question is a bit more action-oriented, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a great question from Eric, and hello to Eric, someone else that I know, former student of our department. So how might AI be used to promote being? One of the lovely things about live conversation is it requires improvisation, and you can't anticipate what questions you may get, which of course stimulates thinking. So thanks for that question, Eric. I think as a tool, AI potentially, when used properly, I mean, one of the things that AI can do very efficiently is to take some of the tools that we have, like force connections and so forth, and be able to. I've done this, and I'm sure many others have as well. When you're wrestling with a problem, turn to AI and say, what ideas do you have? Okay, thank you for those ideas. Now respond, new prompt, respond to this problem from the perspective of Albert Einstein or Walt Disney or another point of view. And AI can very quickly uh, shift frame of reference and give a different set of ideas. And I think if we treat it and recognize the process, it can be instructive to us and be almost treated as a tutor or a creativity coach. Uh, Again, it's like any other tool. It's how you interact with it. If you interact with it at a very superficial level and you don't understand the process, then it probably won't help to facilitate your creative being. But if you turn to AI as a partner and you're aware of how you are using random associations or forced connections and really are thoughtful about the process, it can become a partner and potentially a coach. But we also have to practice on our own. And so it can to help us to drill and experience, but we can't rely on the tool blindly. So yeah, great question, Eric. And I think if used properly, It can become a partner. We just found out last night, the Center for Applied Imagination, Dr. Yates, and I, as a co-principal investigator, were awarded a grant from the State University of New York to develop a creativity bot based on creative problem solving, which we hope, and thanks, Eric, for planting the seed. While it's focused on doing creativity and doing creative problem solving, we want to set up an environment as educators where students are interacting with it and not giving up their creative power, but being able to use the tool to help foster their creative power, their creative being. So great
Okay.
question.
Well, we have quite a few questions, so maybe the responses could be kept a little bit in the interest of time if we'd like to answer many of them. You've generated quite a stir, I have to say. Thank you. So
Oh,
we
I
have
was effective at being a good prompt. Is that what you're saying?
well, actually, you did prompt the questions, yes.
Good. No, that's good.
Good. So, Kai Wang asked a question about the fact, can we envision a future where creativity is different? Framing it within this context. So, for example, the invention of a camera renders good drawing skills perhaps less valuable for some, but it enables new art in terms of photography.
Mm,
So,
mm.
what are your views on the future of creativity? Can
Well,
it be different?
taking your prompt to be brief, it will have to change. I mean, that is the human condition. That's why humans have survived the many millennia, is the fact that we are quite adaptable. And to this point, we suffer from our own creativity. We create and we change our environment, and then we have to adapt to that new environment. So of course, I think it will continue to evolve without a doubt. That's a great insight.
Okay, so our colleague Sandra, hi Sandra, pasted a comment as well. So thank you for the very interesting presentation. Just a comment, I see the advent of ubiquitous AI to be similar to when calculators were introduced and people did not need to do mental arithmetic anymore. I sometimes wonder what the effect on our brains or neurons will be by using AI. As I said, it's just a comment, not a question. But
Hmm. That's a great comment. Now, hi, Sandra.
yes. So I have Alexander von Remon. So who said, "Great to see you." Okay, so I think he is saluting you.
Other.
Um, so perhaps Alexander is congratulating you on the excellent talk. And now we have Laura Switolski who said, how the shift towards the being side of creativity might shift creativity education from a mainly cognitive approach to an approach that considers the emotional and affect side of being creative. That's an interesting one.
That's a great question. By the way, the wonders of technology. So here I am in Buffalo. Laura is actually a neighbor who is only a few streets over from me. So hi, Laura. Great question. So great observation in terms of the cognitive on the doing side. I think that is the power of artificial intelligence. It is replicating cognition, but it can't replace the affective side. I think that's a really interesting way to differentiate the doing from the being. And the being part, we must continue to face change, as the earlier question alluded to. Creativity is going to change. We drive modifications in our environment. Sometimes I feel it myself. It's absolutely exhausting having to adapt to another new change that comes along. And so I think what Laura is alluding to is another, we could add it as a third reason to continue with creative education. And that is on the affective side, just simply being able to deal with the pace of change, to have the open-mindedness and the tolerance and the coping to be able to sustain our energy in a world that, with each successive generation, the pace of change is increasing exponentially. I think that's a fantastic observation.
So, leading on from this question, we have another observation from Jeff Zuckler, said that, so therefore, what should we be designing for our college business programs? Which courses should we be designing? Creativity and ethics in the world of AI. What would we title this class, for example? Perhaps also in relation to the fact that we have students who might be replacing their being creative and learning by having AI do their creative tasks.
Wow, that's again a fantastic question. I'm not going to be able to give in the short time that we have remaining the full answer to all of the courses, but I think fundamentally, the implication of this, walking away from this existential question, is there a role for creative education today in a world of AI? I think it becomes even more important for us to do this work, because life is complicated and we don't have a singularity yet, and life poses us problems. And therefore, we can't give up our creativity because we lose our humanness. And in fact, it threatens our well being if we do. So, all of the examples that Jeff cites, I think, are important. It would be naive for us, which some universities are attempting to do this, to ban AI. I don't think banning AI is the right answer. I think it's learning how to effectively interact with AI and to use it as a tool and to be honest about how we're using it so that we treat it as a tool, but we maintain control and we are the facilitators of creativity with AI and facilitators of our own creativity.
So we have one of our own, Felix. Hello, Felix. So thank you for joining us. Felix is the student voice that you will hear in our chapter in the Palgrave book. And
Oh,
Felix,
thank you, Felix. Yeah, I recognize that name.
so Felix made this observation. So making the difference between the doing and being in creativity, what do you think happens to the process of creativity if AI is involved? So he personally thinks that creativity as a skill changes, as it would become less about generating ideas, but about having accurate analysis to shape a very precise solution space, which the AI should then fill in. What do you
Yeah,
think?
Felix. Yeah, I think it's a great observation. If we think of divergent thinking as the sole creativity skill or ideation as the sole stage in the creative process, then we are limiting the parameters in terms of skills and stages that make up this complex phenomenon, creativity. So while I think, um, with a little bit of experimentation that I've engaged in, while I think AI is incredibly fast at divergent thinking, we still need to facilitate AI, and it may become even more important for us to facilitate the convergent side, the decision-making side, the evaluative side, the critical thinking side of the creative process when working with AI, because fundamentally, at the end of the day, we still have to make the decisions. We still implement and facilitate the change. And so I think critical analysis and being alert to our decision-making rules becomes very important as we're interacting with AI.
And in fact, here, Clara Fleischer makes a comment which I think is very apt at this point in the conversation. So AI helps people to think less, but creativity for me is the rescue to my brain. So we still have to be creative when actually making that call, making that decision. And talking about AI and people, our colleague, Dr. Lisa Patch, has a comment. So, do you think, or question, do you think that the personification of AI and the attribution of human-like characteristics and emotions is a way for humans to connect more effectively with the tool? So, does this constrain how we use the tool to foster imagination?
Yeah, that's a really that's a quagmire. You know, you hear stories about the personification of AI and attributing emotions to AI, and humans kind of losing themselves a bit and their boundaries when working with AI. I don't have a good answer for that. It does bring up caution in my own mind in terms of our interaction with AI, ascribing, projecting emotion. It's moving beyond a tool and developing a relationship potentially with it, which is too easy to lose sight of ourselves and our own being and our own boundaries. So I worry about that a bit. Yeah, that's a magnificent question, and I have some concerns about that kind of attribution being made when it comes to AI.
Mhm. We'll have, I think we'll have time for two or three more. Would that be okay? We'll have quite a few, to be honest, but maybe two or three before we ask Casper to do his intervention. So Francois Malo, he thanked you very much for the presentation, and his question is regarding your take on Johnson's model. Do you think that we will always have to first master the tools to do creativity before trying to become creative? Or can we think that in the future some people will develop their own creative being without mastering the tools of creativity because they will let AI
Yeah,
do
yeah.
the job for them?
So Francois, thank you, and good to hear from you. Thanks for joining us. As a case example of someone who developed my creative being through deliberate applications of tools and practice, I see a certain directionality there, but I don't believe, although that was my experience, that's the only direction the relationship moves in. I think human beings, because of our diversity and innate predisposition to be creative, we're machines of applied imagination. We are gifted with that through evolution. I think there are some challenges when you naturally embrace, as many artists do, the being side of creativity. They are often threatened by the doing side, and they see deliberate creativity and learning deliberate creativity to be an affront to their natural being. But I think the two must work in concert and can flow back and forth, much like Eric's question in terms of how can the AI as a tool help us on the being side. There, from my own experience, can be a directionality, but I think it can work in both directions, especially when facilitated by an effective teacher. Key point there.
Okay. A point made by an international De Bono trainer, so Donna Patch. Hello, Donna. Um, so she said that Professor De Bono used to consider himself a software engineer of the human mind.
Hmm.
Um, because neuroplasticity of the human mind is a different process than pattern recognition in terms of algorithms used by AI, if we had to translate it to today's practices. And that was a comment for her, and she thanked you for the excellent presentation and for sharing this topic with us. Now, we had another question specifically related to the CPS, so the creative problem solving process. So how or have you seen AI use in real time in a group session when using CPS or strategic planning sessions? Have you
I haven't
observed?
yet. I haven't yet, but the grant that I mentioned that we received from the State University of New York is to develop a creativity bot that takes the creative process using the creative problem solving framework and allowing an individual to facilitate themselves through the creative problem solving process. Which one of the questions that Dr. Yates and I actually posed a question to me last night is how do we, as phase two, best practices, use this in a group context? And in all, good design thinking, six thinking hats, creative problem solving, all of these tools, we know the benefits of group application, and I think the same can be true when using artificial intelligence. So I'm excited about, and I think it can accentuate collaboration in groups. Um, One of the, circling back just very quickly to the previous comment in terms of Dr. De Bono seeing himself as a software engineer of the human mind. I think one of the other reasons why it's important that we engage in teaching individuals deliberate creative problem solving, not only for use with AI, but I'm intrigued with this concept of creative self-leadership. That is, how do we facilitate ourselves through life's challenges? And there's a concept in leadership called self-leadership, but I think because of the complexities of life, understanding deliberate creativity allows us to perhaps engage in something I'm calling creative self-leadership, which comes through deliberate training.
Okay, so thank you for sharing these valuable insights. I see that the questions keep coming in. What I can do perhaps is to group them, share them, and then we can share them with the people who are on this call through the registration details that you have shared with us. Okay, so in the meantime, I would like to thank you all for the active contribution. Okay, which given how interested and engaged people were, I think that this would have been a heated debate, which I think could have been interesting but difficult to tame. So hence, I think the Q&A decision was a good one in this regard. So Professor Puccio, thank you once again for generously sharing your time with us today and for sharing these insights with us. And I would like to give the word to Mr. Caspar de Bono, who is Professor de Bono's eldest son, to share a few words with us. Caspar?
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. I have three thank yous and then a reflection on your fascinating talk. And finally, an answer to the first question you posed in terms of what would Edward do with AI. So my three thank yous are firstly to the many people who are listening, either now or later, and showing this topic your interest and enthusiasm. Secondly, to Margaret and colleagues for convening and organizing this memorial lecture. And most importantly to you, Professor Puccio, for your time and your thoughtful response. So some brief context in terms of what your talk made me remember about my father. So I remember that in one of his first books, The Mechanism of Mind, in 1969, he wrote, "It won't be long before computers are doing the processing stage of thinking better than we are." And then in 1972, I was just reading yesterday, in another book called About Think, he said, some years ago, and I'm going to read, he said, some years ago, I was using computers to work out some complicated mathematics in the course of my medical research. Like everyone, I was much impressed by the superb efficiency of the machines, which seemed on the point of making human thinking superfluous. Reacting against this, I became interested in the type of thinking in which the human mind still surpassed computers. So then to the very interesting, all the questions you were asked were interesting, but the first one really made me smile because it reminded me of the anecdote you gave of the very personal experience of sitting in a taxi, listening to my father tell jokes. And he wrote and often said that, in his opinion, humor is one of the most significant behaviors or attributes of the human mind. And when people asked him, do you think computers are going to do all our thinking for us? He said, maybe one day. He said, the most significant moment will be when computers can laugh, when they can create a joke. So I think the answer to the first question, what would Edward do with AI, is he'd do what he was doing with you in the taxi. He would start telling jokes and seeing if the AI laughed, but he'd also ask the AI to tell jokes to him. And he'd be waiting for this moment where the AI could switch perception and suddenly see the situation from a different point of view and do, I guess, the computer equivalent of laugh.
Yeah, brilliant.
So I hope that rather playful image or idea is a suitable way of finishing and thanking you for a really fascinating talk. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Caspar. So I think this brings us to the conclusion of this memorial lecture. So I thank you all for being here. I thank you all 97 registrants for being here, because we retained the crowd, which is, always really lovely to see. Thank you for the incessant support of my colleagues in the preparation for this memorial lecture, which we are privileged to organize on a yearly basis. And I would like to thank you again, Professor Puccio, and thank you, Caspar, for making your intervention. And thank you, everyone, for making the time to join us. Leonie.
Hi, if I may very quickly say a few words. I've been here in the background also really enjoying Professor Puccio's talk, and also now Caspar's intervention. Thank you very much. I thought it would be worthwhile reminding our attendees that we have a very active Facebook page that they might wish to follow to keep up to date with our many seminars, webinars, courses, and whatnot. So if you go to Facebook, it's /iotm.um, or just search for the Edward de Bono Institute. And we're also active on LinkedIn. So for the time being, those are our two social media accounts. Also, you can contact us via email. So thanks again. My 2 cents worth.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So thank you all. You have a lovely day, evening, wherever you are. So thank you. We'll see you next year. Thank you.